morning, cats. We have something really cool for you today. This is just a quick re-edit of a live stream me, Flame, and Walter Lutsch did last week, which was the project reveal of Interlude, our all-new audio drama series focusing on new characters and locations within the Kaiserreich world. The first episode was set in Shanghai in the Legation Cities and told the story of an American comprador doing shady backroom dealings with German and Japanese diplomats. It was a really cool live read, so I wanted to give you guys a quick re-edit so you could find it again for future reference. If you would like to support more original audio content, animatics, and music, don't forget to subscribe to all our channels or join up on our Discord. Thanks for your time and enjoy this first look at Project Interlude. See you, cats. So you have the first line, Gabriel?
That's right. Intro music plays at a low volume. Ambient sounds of the city are heard.
And then we have narrator.
Once, Shanghai was well and truly alive. The hustle and bustle by day, the neon lights by night, the crowds passing by as if shadows, each a life swallowed up by the vastness of the city. Most made do with what they had, which wasn't much, but the rich, well, they were the city's lifeblood. Princes, politicians, exiles. Most rode out last decade's turmoil from their penthouse suites. Behind those doors, an unending party roared. The city's already frantic energy driven to an opium-fueled fever pitch. If you were stuck on the outside, be it in the back alleys or the right of the bund, well, you needed the right friends, or better yet, the right money. That's where I came in. You see, after the war, and especially after the British practically walked out of China in 25, a new crowd came in as some of the old left. Germans, Japs, not to mention a few of my own fresh-faced countrymen. Thing was, half of them couldn't speak a word of Chinese, and the other half didn't speak a word of English. And without neither, we were stuck up shit creek, as they say. You can't do business if you don't have a language to do the business in. I'd been in China for 30 years. I had my list of friends and contracts. I knew the lingo, and most importantly, I knew how to do business in a city like Shanghai. So I set myself up as a comprador, a go-between for all the city's new interests. A mediator, if you like. That's how I found myself in the Yanyu one rainy evening in December 1935.
City ambience fades and is replaced by tea house ambiance.
The Yanyu Jingyan, or just the plain old Yanyu as we called it, was a tea house down by the Hongkou riverside. It wasn't the biggest tea house, but it wasn't the smallest either. Those smoke-filled evenings were where the real business got done. And this time I was due to meet some bean counter from Mitsui. When a big bank sends a little guy, it means one of two things. They're giving you the finger, or they're avoiding attention. Japanese business was good, so I bet on the latter and took the bait. The Yanyu represented Shanghai the way it used to be. Full of opportunity, full of action. A place where the patrons were about as multicultural as the drinks at the tables. The latest Shiradaishu jazz played lazily on the radio. Glasses clinked at nearby tables. The sound of laughter and heated arguments alike filled the air.
The ambient sound gradually increases in volume as the music fades.
The room hummed. You could almost lose track of time. Almost.
The ambient volume drops, and after a short pause, the doors of the tea house open. A few whispers are heard.
A man entered and removed his peaked cap, his gray uniform sticking out like a sore thumb. Few crowds come to this part of town, and even fewer crowd officers. The crowd eyed him warily as he walked over, pulled a chair, and leered imperiously.
Mr. Joshua Duncan?
Depends. Who's asking?
The Ostchina Directorium is asking, Mr. Duncan. My name is Oberleutnant Berend Gluck, and I'm here...
I interrupted him. Oh, sorry.
No, I interrupted him. You don't just blurt out your business in the middle of a crowd. Hey, bud, keep it down. Take a goddamn seat.
Luke sits and clears his throat.
I'm here to ask for information on certain individuals. Individuals whose plan may contravene those of our friends in Nanking, Mr. Duncan. Enemies who might be situated here in Shanghai.
I looked at him and looked back at my drink. Who was this guy kidding? I think you got the wrong man, Lieutenant.
Joffrey chuckles.
I am but a humble comprador. I negotiate, I mediate, I arbitrate. Whatever you're talking about, it's above my pay grade. I never really liked doing business with the Germans. A century of military victory and conquest left them strutting about like made men. The idea that a German officer could walk into any dive in Shanghai and have the entire room jump, click their heels, and erupt in a spontaneous chorus of praise for the Kaiser was inconceivable.
And so you are compensated very generously, Mr. Duncan. Besides, your name appears on some rather interesting documents that recently came into my possession.
Now this was getting interesting.
I know of your dealings with 7 Million Society and the Kuomintang. For your own safety, I advise you to tell me everything you know.
Whispers intensify from around the room.
If you knew much about me, Lieutenant, then you'd know this kind of business ain't my kind of business. Now I'd advise you to leave, as I have other, more pressing business partners to wait for. I wanted to be left alone and allowed to think about how I'd approach my Japanese contact.
Mr. Duncan, do not force me to repeat myself. You will tell me all you know now, or face the consequences.
Whispers intensify further.
I would have punched him then and there, but I had a reputation to uphold, and hell, this fool might have even pulled a gun.
Duncan sighs.
Do you know where we are? We're right smack dab in the middle of Tokyo town. The Japanese have been in charge here for the past 20 years. Pull out that Luger, aim it at me, and you're just asking to start something.
As if I would make such petty threats. No, you must understand. I represent an organization far greater than myself. One word with my superiors or at the consulate, and I can have you blacklisted. No more contracts with AOG businesses, no more work for the Nanking Commission, no more money from Germany. Ever.
Sure. You see those two gentlemen sitting in the corner, Lieutenant? That's Mr. Burke and Mr. Flandin, two old colleagues. They've been in Shanghai for 40 years and know this place like the back of their hand. I'd hazard a guess that Mr. Burke, as an Englishman, is not very fond of your presence. And Mr. Flandin, as a Frenchman, well, let's just say he's got a bone to pick. You can close plenty of doors, Lieutenant, but you'll open plenty more.
You should know, Mr. Duncan, that English and French business is a thing of the past. Now Germany protects Shanghai.
Not this part of town, bud. Didn't I tell you where we were? Besides, northeastern business is the most profitable kind around here. Business with Manchuria. Not many German speakers up there. Say, do you know any Chinese, Lieutenant?
I would not need to if men like you, Mr. Duncan, would cooperate with me.
Duncan laughs. Some other patrons join in.
You really are helpless here, aren't you? You Krauts never cease to amaze. You do know two suspicious-looking Chinese slipped out of here practically the moment you came in. I'll bet they were KMT, people you were actually looking for, instead of me. I'll never forget that Kraut's face. Disbelief, anger, and frustration all at once. I don't know if he even believed me, but he was sure pissed off, and that alone was worth my time. Even the barman grinned. I'll bet you don't even know who Big Ear Do is, do you?
Do I need to?
Duncan and the other patrons laugh.
The man practically runs Shanghai. From the docks to the stocks to the big hotels. Hell, I'll bet he's got an informant in here somewhere. I've done enough business with him to know. Now who do you figure's out to stop him?
Obviously the police commissioner. Who else?
The commissioner's in his pocket. Has been since before he even took office. The man you're looking for is William E. Fairbarn. Now there's a tough bastard. Scars all down his arms and legs, the kind of thing you only get in a back alley knife fight. Don't think he'd be a friend of yours on account of his service in the Royal Marines, but I've done him a job or two. And not everyone who lives to tell the tale. But I could arrange a meeting down some dark street or other.
I imagine he's very threatening, but none of this changes anything. One word with Alexander von Falkenhausen and...
Do you actually know him?
Of course, who doesn't?
Didn't you say you were a lieutenant? Lieutenant? Have you seriously spent any time with him? Gotten to know him? Think you can actually pull a favor?
Das ist unglaublich, diese amerikanischen.
I thought not. Now I'll admit I don't move in those kind of circles myself. As I said earlier, some things are above my pay grade. But you know who isn't? I turned around and pointed to a Chinese man in a navy blue uniform sitting at a table not far behind the lieutenant. The man had paid our little altercation no mind at all, paying far more to the pretty woman at his side, and more still to his poker cards. A cloud of opium practically surrounded his table. That's Sang Shuling, or the Young Marshal, a regular patron here. I do business with him, Lieutenant, and sometimes even with those in his father's circles. You know who that is, don't you? Zhang, the Grand Marshal. I bet more people have heard of him than Falkenhausen outside this quarter of China. I ordered myself a champagne bottle, popped it open, and poured myself a glass. You can't tell your superiors to send someone who actually knows the city next time. I didn't even have time for a sip when the lieutenant grabbed me, lifted me off of my chair, and pulled me to the middle of the room. The whole of Yan Yu was looking now.
You may mock me, but you do not rule this city. You are nothing more than a scavenger, feasting on the bones of the old empires and skulking in the shadows of the new. If we weren't here to guard the balance, do you think the Japanese wouldn't have you by the neck? If we weren't here to protect Shanghai, do you think the Kuomintang wouldn't have you run out like dogs? You are alive only by the grace of the Kaiser. Now speak before I beat you senseless.
The lieutenant is shouting loudly. Everyone is whispering.
He may have had a point, but unfortunately, he hadn't learned his lesson. In Shanghai, I was safer than anywhere else in the world.
The bar's whispering is halted by Joshua shouting.
Hey, Wang! Clock this guy for me, would you?
There's a pause, and then a chair is suddenly heard moving.
Wang was a member of the Green Gang, a real tattooed brute of a man. He'd been a heavy hitter for the last 10 years, if not more. Unfortunately, he owed me a favor. The lieutenant saw him and hesitated, looking back at me and then back at Wang. As I expected, he let me go.
The lieutenant mutters to himself, frustrated.
It seemed he'd finally noticed the room's hostile gaze. Intimidated, or maybe just plain defeated, he turned and left. As the room went back to its business, I tossed a couple cents to Wang, sat back in my chair, and sipped my champagne. My Japanese contact arrived a couple minutes later. He was a military man dressed in a khaki uniform, and he adorned a dark blue shako with a white plume upon his head. His back was straight and his face clean-shaven. Upon entering, some people looked at him, but not as many as did the lieutenant. He quickly sat in the seat that the crowd was previously in. He put his shako on the bar table, looked towards me, and apologized for his delay, after which we started talking. Truly, that was the most interesting night, but oh well. I guess that's every other night in Shanghai once you get used to the city and its inhabitants.